You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Carl Munson.
Hello, Robbie.
You like that intro?
I did. I really did. And this is so interesting for me because we met in a crowded Facebook group. I was putting myself out there to, just wanting to talk about what's going on for me in my life, for podcasting and so on. And you responded, and we had a very interesting conversation, I think, behind the scenes to get to where we're going. But I love your concept. I love your concept that it's like, just people talking, because I think I was saying this to somebody the other day. I think all we've got ultimately is the conversation. People are making a big deal about, how life is and should be in the political realm. And the great equalizer, because people are obviously in politics, it's all about money and power and so on. And then people feel ill-equipped to compete in that sort of area. And I think ultimately the great leveler is the conversation. And we are social creatures, and all we've got really are our ideas and our words. And that's where things change, is in conversation.
Okay, well, ultimately it boils down to conversation. Obviously, it's where things get solved, things get understood through experience and talking it out. Whenever you have a problem, whenever you just trying to understand or get information, you have to talk.
Yeah.
Mostly because that's where you're going to see other people's perspective. And with this whole podcast, the reason why I started it was that nobody was associating with anybody anymore. We're just walking around living comfortable lives and not choosing to learn outside of our comfort zone. So I wanted to bring that in, and I'm very happy where technology has given me the opportunity to be able to connect people like me and you. But enough about the podcast. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally, Carl?
Well, professionally, I am involved in a few things, like a lot of people are these days. One of them is I'm the community builder for something called ournet, which is a new community-focused social network. Hence, my interest in conversation and communication. Also, just recently, and I suppose, this is for me. I've been lucky. I've been able to do a lot of the things I love and mix them up with my professional life. And at the moment, one of the things that I want to professionalize, I suppose, if you like, or certainly create some sort of livelihood around, is the idea of how people heal their past. And it's just dawning on me more and more that the people don't grow up, really. We have the choice not to grow up. And to me, what that means is resolving your past issues. We have to survive our childhoods. I think that's how it is as an animal, as a mammal. It's quite traumatic being born. It's quite traumatic joining your tribe and coming into the world. But that can be resolved, and it used to be resolved through initiation and ritual and so on. And we've lost that, so people don't need to grow up. They can just carry on being hurt children in adult bodies. So, yeah, to answer your question, I'm also looking to build some sort of livelihood around creating support for people who are interested in that idea. And
What types of healing and support are we talking about here? Or is it more about just kind of, because I mean, you can get a form of relaxation that can technically be healing techniques such as yoga, or for me, just experiencing anything that is happy, a happy memory associated, such as like if I were to go camping right now,
yeah,
that's been a big influence in my past. A lot of people don't look at, we do experience a lot of trauma on an everyday basis.
yeah,
What correlates to our memories as kids, such as me being able to go on camping trips with my dad, enjoy a wonderful crab feast, or, something of this sort. If I did that now, I would be immediately taken back to that nostalgia point, basically a trip down memory lane. That's why one of those moments that you do experience, everyone has their own memories and stuff, and a certain point or a certain smell or something that links them back to that.
yeah.
It brings them to tears almost, because it puts you in a point when you weren't at a critical state that you are now. And it also highlights that a lot of things are going on around you now that before you were never experiencing. And it starts to help you narrow down things that you need to focus on solving.
True. And that, I love the sound of that. And this is all part of the conversation, isn't it? As in the big conversation, and then the verb of conversation, if you like. is that you telling me a story about your childhood there. I get it. I get it that you have a beautiful memory associated with your childhood and those camping trips. And another part of that might be, and I'm moved by that you telling me about that experience. But another aspect of that might have been something that didn't go so well in the past on a camping trip. And this is what happens to kids, isn't it? You might have been in America, I think you have sort of camps, don't you? Like summer camps where loads of kids go. There might have been some sort of difficult situation that's part of growing up, some sort of humiliating situation, for example. These sorts of things go on, don't they, when kids get together and they're in a big camp situation.
And you start to remember it whenever you're laying in bed at like 2:00 in the morning. You're like, oh shit, remember what I did in 7th grade? Oh my
Exactly.
God.
Yes, and to me that can be resolved. There are processes now that can resolve that, and the problem is that it doesn't go away. It's like by not dealing with it, it's not dealt with. It's not resolved. It's not healed, and it's not just an abstract little splinter. What tends to happen with the way that human beings work is that you frame a lot of your life through that. So you might deny yourself experiences, thinking that could happen again because it's part of your animal response to life. I think what behavioral scientists called your limbic system, or biologists even, it becomes hardwired as a survival mechanism. Understandably, you don't want that to happen to you again. So you create a mental process and a physiological process. All of us, our whole wiring then is adjusted to stop that happening because we don't want to feel that pain. But the very setup program, if you like, of our response to that then governs the rest of our life too. So on the one hand, you can go about your life according to all these programs that were there put in place for safety, or you can have a bigger view of that, I suppose, a more conscious view, which is actually, I did survive and I don't need this program running anymore, and I can enjoy a freedom that comes with letting go of it.
Well, see, I think where that comes from, where people start to look back at a lot of mistakes that they made and it chooses to hold them back into the future. The example that could probably be easiest that I could think of would be like if you're on a racetrack, or even a bowling alley. If you've ever been bowling, you're throwing a ball at a bunch of pins. So the pins are kind of the obstacles in your way. The bowling ball is you. You're basically putting up these barriers, a little side stuff to keep you out of the gutter. You're
Yeah,
putting up these things, which is how kind of society structures you in a way.
yeah,
Society structures you to be a perfect person. So whenever you make a mistake, whenever you do something and you don't address it or you don't try and recover from that, you just choose to gloss over it like, oh, no big deal, and then move on, try and put it behind you.
yeah,
You're not clearly addressing it. And that's going to toll on your mind because your mind's going to think, oh shit, remember that one time I did this and then this happened? Well, if you don't address it when you get older, like we're saying, when you start laying down and you start thinking about all the mistakes you've made, all the past things, and realizing how messed up of a person, whatever, that's all self-inflicted. Nobody else is thinking that. It's all because we live in this structured life where you have to be perfect. And I think one of the best parts about people, and one of the most difficult also, is that we're not perfect. We're
yeah.
trying to be perfect people in a not perfect world and around other people that are not perfect. But that's the best part about it. Like we're meant to have flaws for a reason. Our fuck ups are sometimes our greatest feats.
Sure. And it gives you something to work on, doesn't it? And I suppose to me, it's a sort of epidemic proportions now. So you're absolutely right. There is this idea of perfection, but I think that is a almost complete reflection of dysfunction, because what that picture of perfection has been created by is lots of hurt and dysfunctional people who and everyone knows it, really, don't they? Everyone seems to understand. Some of your greatest comedians in America recognize. Bill Hicks is my favorite on that subject. The picture of perfection that's created by marketing people, for example, has come completely from pain and temporary fixes and addictions that might make you momentarily feel better, but doesn't completely heal you or allow you to grow up. And then, arguably you get the kind of president you've got, where you have at the top of the tree, in that power structure, somebody who is, he's a big child, isn't he? I mean, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way, but he would just appear to be somebody who hasn't recovered from his childhood, who is now center stage in terms of world power, being like that. And we're in a conspiracy with it because everyone's got a little bit of that inside them as well. It's a kind of reflection of where we're all at, as, in terms of our dysfunction and how able we are to grow up and resolve the past.
Well, talking about healing methods, though, what would you suggest would be a good healing method? We could talk about, certain memories and certain points taking you back to a time where you weren't in such a critical state. Also, for me, I know fitness has been a big influencer when it comes to healing.
Yeah.
Definitely big stress relief. I know when someone cuts me off while I'm driving or someone flicks me off while I'm driving, I know I can just go to the gym and hurry up, crank out a set or get a workout, and I'm completely relieved.
Yes. Well, that's a really great example. Different people respond differently to that. Getting what do you call it? Flipping the bird or something when you're
Yeah.
driving along. Someone abuses you.
Sticking up that beautiful middle finger that makes me want to, every time I see it, snap it off.
Yes, exactly. Now that's such a great example because it's almost like a test of your level of healing. That just that sinks. The fact of the matter is somebody's holding a middle finger up. That's a fact. What you make that mean, I think, is directly related to the level of healing that's taken place within you. So, to answer your question specifically, what techniques could you use? Is when that happens and you are emotional, you get into an emotional state. A lot of really great techniques, I think, at the moment will help you track back that emotional state to the time you made the decisions about how to survive and respond to the first events in your life of that kind. And so metaphorically, the middle finger that you get when you're driving, you might have experienced as a small child as a rejection. It's rejection, isn't it? It's like, screw you, fuck you, you're an idiot. Now that, I think, is a conclusion you can understandably come to as a small child, that you're being rejected, left, or some circumstance in life leaves you in that same vulnerable position that causes an emotional upset, and a big emotional upset that then causes a hardwiring and a survival plan. So specifically, what techniques I've come across just recently, and I never used to sort of feel that comfortable with people of this kind, but it makes so much sense to me now, having gone through some of these processes, is intuitive and energetic healers who can see and sense where these imbalances manifest in your body. So whilst on the one hand, your perpetrator is giving you the middle finger, how you receive that may well have a physical register in your body. Your belly might become very tense and anxious, or you get a pain in your body somewhere, which actually can be restored and resolved on face value. And you can do that with an energy healer who doesn't even need to know all the story. Because that's the other thing, you could say therapy would be a good remedy for healing these childhood wounds. But one of the problems with that, and as I'm understanding trauma better and better, is if you keep talking about it, you're actually bringing those emotions back into the body constantly and actually feeding that beast. So great energetic healers don't need to know the story. They just need to know where you've been affected in your body, and they can help you put that right. Others are integration processes. Only last week, I went through an integration process to deal with a story I have about my early childhood, but I was able to integrate that, what some people would call the inner child or the fragmented child or the lost child, into my experience now. And it was a massive and beautiful healing experience. And it brings about other benefits in your life because you're operating from a new place.
Sometimes I think with therapy, I think the form that they're trying to act on is being able to psychoanalyze the problem that is going on in your own life, depending on where you seem like you're getting a lot of your tension from. If someone tends to have anger issues, it's probably because they were never either outspoken as a child about them, and they choose to harbor up a lot of their problems. See, you get different types of people that react to getting, given the bird or something, getting flicked off. You have a couple thoughts that go in your head. Before the gym, if someone flicks me off, the first thing I think in my mind is I want to take the middle finger and snap it off. After the gym, I'm so relieved and so just all my anger is gone. My cortisol levels are usually pretty high. So I'm like, all right, I'm in the state, like I'm as chill as a cucumber. And so if someone does that, I'm like, whatever. But what you were saying earlier about the middle finger and what that means to us, that actually brings a lot more of a spoken word when it comes to the concept of what different symbols and things mean in different areas. I know from working with these foreign students at my work in Bulgaria, their sign for yes, like the head nod up and down, is actually no. And the sign for no is yes. So when you're sitting there and they ask you a question, I was saying, yeah, I'll help you out. And they're like, why are you saying no? But you're
Yeah.
and it was confusing. But that's all about where they grew up, though. So that's their inference ever since they were a little kid of what that symbol means to us. I think a lot of people automatically know that the middle finger means, like a hey, fuck you,
Yeah.
because it is so involved into our society today. You see it constantly. I can see it 3 or 4 times a day some days. If I choose to associate a lot with a lot of people out in public, they're not doing it towards
Yeah.
me, but
Yeah.
everyone starts throwing it around like it's candy or something. I'm like, look, all right, there's a point where it loses all meaning to it.
Mm.
I'm a big
But that's interesting because yes, I totally get it that it's a cultural reference and you have to grow up with it to understand it. But it almost proves the point that we are programmed, because that stimulation, if you understand what it means, or that stimuli, that signal, if you understand what it means, you couldn't take it personally. And the person who doesn't understand it doesn't take it personally. And it can be unactivated, if you like. So not everybody clearly is going to react in the same way as when they receive that sign, certainly if they don't understand what it means. But even if they do, and I think they're resolved, you see, what I think some of the sanest people I know would see that person who's giving you the finger is the one with the problem. It's up to you what meaning you make of it personally. And you might go to a place inside yourself where you feel like your adequacy is being challenged. And if you do feel inadequate, just the mere sign of someone's middle finger is going to send you spiraling.
well, shit, Carl, you're thinking rationally in an unrationally thinking world.
Yeah, I'm
It's
guilty as
true.
charged.
It's true. I mean, you're thinking, you're coming at it from a more elevated perspective rather than the common person that's coming at it with, that's a sense of aggression towards me, I'm going to fight you over it. And then when they get up to the point where a fight is going to happen, everyone gets afraid and someone's shitting their pants because you realize you basically cashed a check that you don't have money for.
Yes, we've all been there, haven't we? We've all been there where, in the cartoons, where the character runs out over the cliff and their legs are going round and there's no ground to run on anymore. Yeah, and that tells you something about the animal response of human beings. But what I'm proposing is that we do have a choice. It can be seen like that, and you don't have to be activated. And then the next choice is like, well, what sort of life and world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a world where you're constantly activated, or do you want to get some handle or perspective on that and live in a less adrenaline fueled angry world? And the other, when I said it has other benefits, what I think also happens when you take that route of healing and you think, Jesus, why do I have to get into a fight every time I see someone's middle finger? You can relax, you can wind that in a bit and actually get some freedom. And you can still fight if you want to, but what I'm suggesting is you might be at a place of choice one day with it, rather than automatic. You see, my dad, for example, if he got the middle finger from anyone in a car, on the street, he would have to probably fight it out because he was programmed, hardwired, if you like, and he didn't feel like he had a choice. What I'm suggesting is there is a choice.
I definitely think that what when you talk about therapy, the types of focuses that it does on to learn better insight onto yourself, therapy is meant to cure trauma. Trauma is now getting associated with aggression. When someone is being very angry or someone is just being like what you would call an asshole, you probably look at them like they probably experienced a hard life or a bunch of hard moments into their life.
Yeah.
That is built up trauma on the basis of how we think about ourselves. On a daily basis, you are putting yourself down, whether you know it or not. On
Yeah.
a daily basis, you're making critical adjustments on the things that you do in your everyday life that honestly, nobody's really giving two shits about.
Yeah.
Um, I always say, like, I'm a big advocate when it comes to cursing, only on the aspect of, I got family that listen to my podcast. And they always ask me, why do you curse so much? I don't hear this around you. I'm like, you don't need to be dropping fuck around grandma's pancakes. There's no need for that there. But to annihilate it completely from your life will be me living a false perspective,
Yeah.
because I use curse words in my everyday life. And the reason why is it's a stress relief. If you randomly drop something, you randomly do this, it doesn't mean you need to sit there and flick off whatever item you dropped and just stare at it and go, you suck, I can't believe you. No, there doesn't need to be that. But what there does need to be is a simple, shit, I just dropped my cereal. Okay, let's move on from it. That aggression is what I call, it's a stress fracture that you're getting, and you're basically clearing that stress fracture. But a lot of people aren't doing that. They're not handling things well. We're building up so much trauma that at the end of the day, when you experience a heavy haul of stress fractures, you basically come at it like this. Oh, next thing you know, your car breaks down. You're sitting on the side of the road like, God, my day just didn't even go off well. I got this went wrong, this, and you start listing and listing and listing and listing, which all could have been fixed in that moment if you would have just addressed it and moved the fuck on. But we're not doing that. We're like, oh, I'll just get past this. Can't let this ruin my day. Can't let this ruin my day. It's going to ruin it later if something else hits you. You're just pushing the obstacle a little bit farther down to where the next problem is supposed to come up. Then you're getting a double hit from both.
I think you're absolutely right. And that really illustrates the kind of everyday way that trauma affects our lives. Because shit's going to happen, right? It's a bit, what came to mind when you were talking is like, what would Jesus do if he stubbed his toe, right? So if you're a sort of very devout Christian person, you would like to think that Jesus would like be completely cool about stubbing his toe and would have some kind of spiritual bypass for
Hell
that.
no. He's wearing sandals. That shit probably hurts.
Sandals or barefoot. And I'm hoping that Jesus would have said, fuck, that hurts.
Yeah.
And then it would be over and done with. Okay.
That's my Jesus right there.
Yeah, that's my Jesus too. If, however, that Jesus has a thought process like, oh dear, I just said fuck, I'm gonna, Dad's gonna send me to hell now. That's not someone who's free and living in the moment, right? That's someone who's going through all sorts of hell already. They've already gone to hell if they're giving themselves grief about just expleting and exploding for having a lapse of consciousness and stubbing their toe. If it can be done and dusted and resolved there and then, that to me is a great animal response and one you can move on from. And animals do it better than human beings. But we tend to immerse ourselves in drama and programs as human beings. So I absolutely agree with you. And you make a great point that you don't really do it at grandma's house because it's not socially acceptable and you don't want to upset your grandma. But at the bar with your friends, whatever here, it's a contextually appropriate place to just be free and natural.
Yeah, there's a time and place for everything. And I think that, like, if you want to talk about self-healing, as a society, we're pro advocates for it, but nobody's actually clearly addressing it. We sit here, we find like, oh, and we choose to isolate ourselves and be like, well, my problems have decreased, so I'm obviously getting better. No, you've just associated with so many people and so many influences into your everyday life. And that's why I always bring up this thing. If something bad happens to me, I'm usually like, why don't I just go live up in the mountains like a monk? They don't have any fucking problems. And the reason why I say that is because they've disconnected so much that they don't have any problems to get into. It feels like that's why a lot of people don't choose to talk anymore, because it's so much harder to talk to someone, whether someone wants to get something from somebody, whether someone wants to attack somebody, whether someone wants to just express themselves in a way that is not a right way of expressing yourself. A lot of people, I'm pro speaking your mind, but speaking your mind gets diffused when you're being an asshole about it. Especially like politics, you want to sit there and speak your mind, calling someone a dumb or calling someone whatever you want to call it because they're not in your favor. There's no need for that. You're resorting to false tones and pretext or something where you're trying to discover something about somebody, basically labeling them on the basis of a quick interaction of, oh, you're a Democrat, oh, you're a liberal, oh, and then you immediately judge them in such a way where you start creating this narrative in your head that they've had a stupid life, everything was given to them or something. I'm like, what are you doing? You don't know what that person has been through. Stop speaking your mind and learn to be more open-minded. It doesn't mean don't say what's on your mind, but don't force your shit onto their shit, because all you're really doing is you're crippling them. You're hitting them in the knee with a lead pipe. It's not fair.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely, and it's a lot of projection goes on, doesn't it? So rather than look within and heal ourselves and address what's running inside us as a program, we'd much rather see that in someone else and then attack them for it. But you're really just attacking yourself. I think when you attack anybody else, it's just easier, possibly in some ways, to do it that way. But I love what you're saying. That it's important to talk, and it's important to say what's there for you, and it's useful to do it in a way that is not just going to cause trouble. And it's also great to have a context where you agree. I mean, this is a sense I get of this conversation, is we're going to say what we have to say. We're going to sort of bat it around and listen to what each other has to say. And we're going to stick around and clear up any difficulties that arise. It's not a hit and run, like, I need to take my anger out on someone. This looks like a good interview to do that.
Now you know why I gave you so many questions in the beginning.
Yeah.
I always tell people, I don't care about the titles. I don't care about the degrees. I don't care about how educated and all this stuff that you want to throw in your resume that might get you a better job. Don't send that shit to me. Just when you come onto the podcast, I have one clear thing. I'm not a platform for promotion. I'll give you time to be able to address it and everything you want to talk about, obviously, but it's a conversation. I'm out here doing this for myself, not for anybody listening. I'm not doing this for anybody else. I'm doing this to be able to talk one-on-one with people, the people that I truly deep down care about, such as the one I can get on a one-on-one. If I'm talking to you, Carl, and then I go and try and talk to you with a bunch of other people around, you're going to give me two different perspectives. You're going to give me two different people. I'm going to act a little bit different because I don't know what I'm going to ask you based on we're not in the same room together. I don't know if you want to talk about Bigfoot. I don't know, whatever you want to talk about. The best thing I've ever been kind of, I guess, told to others what I'm like. I'm not a good person. I'm not a bad person. I'm Robbie. That I take to the grave because I act like this around everyone in the middle of 100,000 people, whatever. It's because I honestly, I don't want to show a character. I don't want to go and just be ignorant. I honestly really don't like people when it comes to all the types of people that are around in society today, the fake image ones, the ones that are living the structured gym that works a 9-to-5 lifestyle, the ones that seem like, oh, how's your day going? And they keep walking by. Don't do that. That I won't answer you. If you're not going to stop and address me like an actual person instead of doing default answers and this autopilot response, it's not real. But when I sit with that person one-on-one and we decide to engage into a conversation for an hour or longer, you start to realize that there's a person deep down in there, and that's the one I care about.
Yeah, good for you. I love it. And I think this is an area of podcasting as well that I think is really powerful. And so much of the podcasting world is all sort of like, it's a very good metaphor or mirror of what we're talking about, because a lot of the talk in podcasting is all about, how do you get better known? How do you get your numbers up? How do you improve the metrics? How do you get a sponsor? How many times should you? And it's all about the numbers. And there's such a great possibility of human interaction and quality with podcasting because of the medium. There's that what's he called, Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. And there's something really beautiful about podcasting, that it is about the conversation. You've really nailed something here. I think is that it is the art of the conversation, really, and what can happen in the magic of not making it too structured and agendaed, and what happens when you just turn the microphones on and people start talking. That's a really special thing. And it made us especially good, I think, as you said at the beginning, because the technology allows us, me in Portugal, I'm a Brit living in Portugal. We met on social media, and here we are having a conversation of this kind. That's a really wonderful thing. And I think there's a sort of therapeutic aspect to it. There is a growth, personal development. And it's just like, a sense of fulfillment and fun that can come from this that I think a lot of podcasters miss.
Yeah, I think also with a lot of podcasting too, I do love podcasts, and I'm a big advocate on people starting their own. I've started so many people's podcasts. I've helped them grow. I love to see the growth that they get in it. Even if they end up surpassing me, I'm 100% pro for that, because I always express to people just from the start, the very beginning, I never wanted to turn this into a job, but more of a hobby, a passion project. Obviously it's cool to make money off of it, whatever. But I tell people, like, when they ask me, what about your listeners? How many listeners do you average? I want to know before I come on. I'm like, sorry, guess we didn't fit together. We didn't vibe together. You know, if you want to promote something, when you send that to me, I immediately, you know how hard it is to engage in messaging and be able to express your full personality into a message.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really fucking difficult. That
Again,
happened.
medium is the message.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can you do that in a tiny little box and space like that? Yeah, I
And
get it.
that's how, when we were messaging, when you were like, I want to talk about this, I was like, I've had so many people come on before that want to sit there and shove a topic or idea in your face, where it's like literally they're on for 30 minutes and they're like, oh, and all they do is keep plugging and plugging and plugging. I'll sit there and I'll be like, okay, well, when we finish the episode, because they're like, I have to go or something. I'll be like, okay, well, when we finish the episode, I'll post it. And he goes, what do you mean finish it? Isn't it done right after this? No, because you gave me 30 minutes of bullshit the whole time. I want to talk to the person. They end up being like, all right, well, I have another meeting and I'll be back. Where you start to see that is when you look on certain pages, such as guest experts and all these people that are going on to be a guest on a podcast. They line 80 million of them up a day. And then they try and associate the times. So they're like, oh, I'll give you 45 minutes. You can schedule in here, 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 here. Okay, I'm not going to do any of that. Message me when you get an hour. What do you mean message you when I get an hour? I'm looking to have a conversation with you and you're looking for a spotlight to fame. So we got to go hand in hand here and let's just talk and address that. You're going to end up having a really good time and totally forgetting about the fame aspect when you come on the show. Now, obviously, we're being recorded. So when it comes to how how they choose to address themselves or how they choose to act on a podcast, it ends up getting deformed, though, because you can't keep that shit up for longer than an hour. You really can't, unless you're like some Christian Bale Batman type. You end up being like, well, I don't think that's a highly good possibility. And then after like a while, the guy's like, man, fuck that. And I'm like, yep, there you go. There you are. Give me it. And it's like I'm grabbing a fishing reel, trying to reel them out of something. I'm like, come on, give me that real person. Give me that person. It's not to put you on blast. It's not to do any of that. It's to show and actually have an engaging conversation with the person I know that's down in there. Stop giving me that mask. You know, we walk around too much in our everyday lives, and this is where a lot of our stress kind of comes from. We're showing a character. We're showing a false persona. It's like you're watching fucking Shakespeare. Like this guy, he's sitting here going, I don't know about the vegetables. I mean, the price of them is just keep going up. And deep down in his head, he's jamming, just screaming like death metal. He's thinking about going to a rock concert and getting a tattoo on his ass. And I'm like, why is this guy in front of me that's dressed up in a suit and he's wearing black rimmed glasses talking about the price of cabbage when deep down I know he just wants to get a tattoo of a quarter on his ass? That's all I want to know. And I see that in people. I get to see the real imagery. And yeah, that's a crazy ass example, but
Literally.
I literally, yeah, exactly. And I see this in people, and I'm like, does nobody else, like I tell some of my family, I'm like, does nobody else see this shit? And like, they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, they're playing an act. Like, oh, that's not true. They're such a good, kind-hearted person. Every time I warn somebody about someone, like, be careful what road you go down, I've always ended up being right. Because I can sense it for some reason. I used to lie all the time as a kid, such as being fake sick from school. Yeah, bullshit. I'll tell my parents. I used to take Doritos and like Gatorade, swish it up in my mouth and spit it out in the toilet. Be like, I can't. I threw up. I got to stay home just to play video games. The fact that they didn't figure that out, I can't believe it. But whatever. But I used to be so good at lying and convincing and conniving that at one point when I was like 14, 15 years old, I was like, I'm done with this shit. I can't do it anymore. It's literally making me ill trying to express myself rather than who I feel like I am. And that was from trauma that I obviously experienced in the past and kind of disassociating myself with people. But I think I've turned into a clear-minded person from that. And every step that I take trying to express myself as a just me, um, it has improved me. I definitely think like when you want to talk about trauma, you want to talk about types of focuses, and we can go all off on my psychological past, yeah, whatever. But when it comes down to the basis of it, when you decide to look at these things and start to talk about the concept of things that we're talking about, such as with trauma related incidences and kind of recovering from that, it's from a place where you've experienced trauma and you've come from a better form. You obviously might experience that on an everyday life, but where motivational speakers come in also, when they start to talk about the concepts and the things that they're really, incited about, such as motivational speaking, getting you in the drive to get moving, is because they went over something that a lot of the average people do not go over. I'm not talking about you ran out of milk for your cereal. I'm talking about a car accident, a certain death related illness, or a certain loss of a limb or something.
Yeah.
That is where motivation arises from. So I do have to ask, where did your inspiration for dealing with trauma and healing come from?
Oh, yeah, great question. But before I answer that, because I want to acknowledge your, where you're at and what I think is very well special about, your approach, your self-awareness. I think is a prerequisite for anybody interested in healing and resolving themselves and growing and growing up and being free. It's a really important component which you appear to have there. Like calling yourself out, that immediately suggests a transcendent view of yourself, and that wonderful thing of like at such an early age getting sick of yourself, thinking, Jesus, there must be a better way of doing this, of doing life, than making all this shit up.
Well, there's a point where you start making up so many lies, you end up getting caught in your own shit. Like, I was like, wait a minute, hold on. What did I remember? Wait, what did I exactly tell you? Wait, no, it wasn't a hockey game. It was a soccer game. Be like, soccer in fucking December, Robbie? It's snow outside. How are you playing soccer? Like, you're not a kid? What are you talking about?
But you see, I think it takes some people 3, 4, 5 decades to get to that level of awareness, and that's just an observation about you, and perhaps a quickening among younger people anyway. That should happen, I believe. The generation should get faster and faster and outpace their ancestors, because that would be a sense of evolution and progress. And from my point of view, I think it's the same. I feel more fleet of foot and aware than my parents have been, and that's fine. And that's not a judgment of them. I just think that's how it should be. That's how a lot of parents want their kids to be, to have greater chances and opportunities in life. But that for me was, I think, an early motivator was really seeing what a mess I thought my parents' lives were and how unhappy they were. And I think when you're born, you come from you come from an unlimited life, a bit of life in all its glory and expansion and unlimitedness is that then squashed into a human body as a human representation of life, and that's quite an uncomfortable process for anybody. I think, and birth is, and then coming into the tribe that you're in is also an educational awareness process that you have to go into, and for me it was an awkward one. Thank you. I got a bit of lunch being brought to me. This is Robbie are you in Baltimore, Robbie?
I'm in Ocean City, Maryland. Very, very
Oh,
small town.
Ocean City, Maryland. We're just recording a podcast.
Well, where is she? Let me see her. Come on.
Let me see her, he says. This is my beautiful wife Louisa, who's an
Hey,
astrologer.
what'd you bring them? Did you bring them a peanut butter sandwich?
Not a peanut butter sandwich. We don't do that here, do we?
No, a bit of pasta.
Pasta, as you guys would call it.
What? It's dinner time there, isn't it?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I'll leave you to
I'm
it.
very happy
Bye.
talking to you. But you might want to talk to Louisa at some point. She's an astrologer and coach and stuff.
Oh, for sure. I mean, see, that brings back a memory for me. Like, people are always like, "Are you going to edit that out of the podcast?" I'm like, "Hell no," because it's real conversation. I love those moments. I have podcasts with people where their kid will knock on the door, "Dad, I'm hungry." He's like, "Oh, just 5 more minutes. Can we pause this real quick?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, we can pause it," and then it ends up getting resumed later. Mostly, editing is a hassle, and I don't like doing it, so I try not to do it. That's why I leave all that in there. But like I have people that are like, "Why is the audio quality like that?" I'm like, because I have people that'll talk on a cell phone. I have people that'll talk while they're driving to work. I'll have people that'll talk and give me that hour. I'm looking for that hour wherever you might have time to squeeze it in. I honestly am grateful that a person can squeeze in that hour.
Yeah.
It's not being like I want to associate with everyone, but it's like we all have a opportunity and obviously a choice whether we want to do something like talking to someone else like a stranger for an hour. And the people that are willing to do that but might not have the time because of their everyday lives or just the way schedules line up, like I'll lose sleep over doing a podcast. I've woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning with someone in Australia where it's like nighttime there. um
Yeah. But I understand that you understand the magic of conversation.
yeah.
And the more editing and production you do, the more you squeeze that out of the mix. Because I was doing some consultancy work. I was running this thing called a podcast gym, just like to encourage people to do it. It's like it's not a big deal. It's not that difficult. It's not like flying an airplane. This is a fairly straightforward matter. There are a few things you need to overcome in yourself probably, but by the end of it, a few weeks into it, I was thinking, hold on a minute, I'm running the Institute of Therapeutic and Transformational Podcasting here, because what it was about people sharing themselves and what was really true for them, rather than all the bullshit stuff about how to get it on this platform and that platform and what's the ideal distribution and regularity of recording and all that. So that's all so boring and all doable. What you're doing, I think, is the real magic of it, which is to really get into the naturalness and authenticity and vulnerability of people, and yeah, so staying up late, having them talk to you while they're doing something else. These are all really good ways of like really connecting at a much deeper level than the superficial PR spin, just promotional stuff.
It's also, it brings a more humanistic side into the conversation
Yeah,
as well. It's what I tell people, like when I put up the Instagram picture with your face on it, it connects voice and your name to a face. It lets people
yeah,
know that you are an actual person, because so many times we want to go on and we want to be in this disguise and this character. And I'm trying to show people that a character is not going to work for me. I want to see
yeah.
the real one. I've had people come on that give me a fake persona.
Oh,
Um,
really?
oh yeah, this dude, mostly Reddit people. If you ask from Reddit when they hop on here, they're like, had a dude, his name was like uh, Brady Gilbert or something, and I'm like talking to him, and I'm through the whole thing, I'm like, man, I know you're lying to me right now, but let's just talk, dude. Because all he wanted to do was talk about video games, and he was like, well, I'm 30 years old, and I work for the government, so I can't really talk about that. And then like I'm like, okay, so I'm sitting here. I'm not like, I'm still having a conversation with them, but I still have a bunch of episodes where people come on and then they end up deleting their Facebook or something to the point where like you can't find them. It's always a fake person. But
Wow.
I've done a couple of those. I still have them on my computer because there's still conversations that I have, but I care more about the individual ones too. I care about the people that are choosing to like put their name, their face out there. It's not like this thing is fucking TMZ. It's not like I'm inviting people on to be attacked, which a lot of people feel like that's what it is. And I'm like, the topic is just conversation, such
Yeah,
as how we're doing right now. And also, when your wife came in, that's your wife, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
When she came in and dropped, you said pasta in front of you.
Yes.
I immediately thought back to the moment when I was playing video games so much as a kid that I would forget to eat. So my dad would walk upstairs with a sliced peanut butter sandwich, and he would set it down in front of me like he's putting something down in front of a dinosaur, and he would back away slowly with his hands up. And I
Yeah.
just like would be playing a game and I'd look down and see it there, and I'd look over, I'm like, thank you, because it probably had been 3 days since I've eaten anything. Because I was into the game. I was like, I don't need to go downstairs. And then next thing you know, you're waiting around for the next match to start, and you look away and you're like, holy crap, what day is it? It's like, oh, it's school time. I'm like, but the weekend just started. No, buddy, you've been playing Xbox for like 3 days straight. I'm like,
Well,
oh,
that's amazing. That's a kind of culture I just don't understand. But my son, I'm sure, is growing up into that. That's a great little insight into your life, and it reminds me of a fantastic joke I heard from a British comedian. And this is when you know your mum really loves you. He was talking about the time he was listening to music, and he started jerking off in his chair with his headphones on.
that
And when he
escalated
woke,
quickly.
when he woke up, he had a cup of tea next to him. Well, not woke up, when he opened his eyes again after his masturbatory experience. He opened his eyes to find that his mother had put a cup of tea next to him, and his mum was just, oh bless. But maybe that's the sort of thing you want to edit out of your podcast. I don't know. That's a that would just tickle me.
I think that shows like what parents are going to do just to not address something. I mean, how many times have been people out there that, your parents know you're fucking jerking off. They know what's happening. They can expect. Why are you taking extremely long times in the shower? I hear so many comedians talk about it. Like, I just know my dad knew. Like, he would bring it up at the dinner table. Long showers you're taking there, huh, buddy? And then he gives me a magazine. And he's like, hey, don't let these get stuck together. Like, he knows because he did the same shit. I think like a lot of people choose those moments and they address them and they think about them for the rest of their lives. They sit there and they go, oh my God, remember that time my parents caught me doing this or caught me doing that? And then they sit there and harp on it. And that goes back to what we originally were talking about
Without a doubt.
trauma.
Without a doubt.
Be
And it's
open
about the
about that.
conversation, it's about the resolution. Yes, indeed. And talking is the beginning of freedom. I guess that could be the subtitle of this podcast. You know, talking begets freedom. Conversation begets freedom. It's the starting point for that.
Conversation is liberation.
Yeah.
I just thought of that. Put it on
Yeah.
a t-shirt. Fucking
You get that in your merchandise section.
Tattoo
Sure.
on my face. Liberation. Oh, that's a long ass thing to get tattooed onto your face.
It is. Yeah, you have to go to a very literate tattoo artist with that. But I've got a prediction for you. You see, in terms of, you know, how we craft personalities and the activities we take up in life, I've got a feeling that you're a very sort of empathic, sensitive sort of person.
I had a couple podcasts I'll point you towards that actually go deep into that based on like my mom's a big like Reiki energy healer type person. I'm not a fan of it. I honestly can see the perspective of it, but when it comes to putting your hands on me, I hate that mostly because she chooses to do it at all the wrong times. Like when you're eating food, just hops right in front of you. Before you boil your shrimp, let me just put my hands on. I'm like, are you shitting me? I haven't eaten since 1 o'clock in the morning and it's 9 at night.
Get away from the food.
Yeah, get away. I'm trying to, eat something here. But she talks about me being empathic, and it's commonly what I like to link to besides my ADHD as my sense of insomnia. I don't sleep well. I go to the grocery store at 3 o'clock in the morning, like early ass times in the morning. I work out early in the morning and kind of rotates around the clock because going out into everyday life, unless it's for work, is just so draining because I see so many people and I can sense a little bit of hurt in them all.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. That's you. And it's an uncomfortable gift, isn't it? Until you make sense of it or make use of it or whatever. That's just my, there's no pressure. It's just like it's just an insight, and I suspect over time you'll make it more comfortable for yourself, or you might make it more uncomfortable for yourself. But that's all part of the process of, kind of settling into who you are and the gifts you've got, I think.
I'm the type of guy that, a lot of people want to create problems for themselves. I'm the type of guy, like if I see something I can like, I don't want to put it like this, but if I see quicksand and I step one foot in, I'm like, well, I can use my other foot to get now we got both feet in here. Now we're slowly sinking. I'm like, all right, well,
You're an active learner.
shit. Yeah. That whole type of thing, it's the whole, like, I like learning from a lot of my mistakes as well, because I see like it's a better insight to overcome from that too. I mean, all my, whatever you want to call me, intellectual, call me an idiot. I use a lot of humor, but I can be serious at times. But I use it because we are too serious as people. Way too serious. Nobody wants to joke around and create a little bit of a laugh or a banter anymore. And I think that's a wrong way of going about it, because all that's going to create is a more serious world. And in this world today, I believe the best and simplest thing and the easiest answer to things is to crack jokes on the bad times, crack jokes on all these moments in your life, and just choose to use humor in your everyday life to create a more overall sensitive and carefree world. Not so carefree
Absolutely.
where we're lighting fires and stuff, but carefree to the point where you feel like going out into the world isn't a task. It's more of an opportunity.
Yeah, and it's very interesting you mentioned humor because I think the reason people feel moved to use humor is because they can't have the conversation directly. And that's what, the jester in the royal court is about, when everything's getting too serious for the king and the council and so on in the royal court. It takes the fool to remind everybody they're taking themselves too seriously. And in a culture where you can't just have a conversation without upsetting someone or getting upset yourself, because that's where it seems to be at the moment, it often comes down to humor to be because it's a convention, isn't it? It's an acceptable way with shortcomings that isn't a direct way of doing it. And we like to laugh at ourselves sometimes. And that's perhaps why you do that. It's a sort of sugar-coated truth for people, isn't it, to make a joke about things?
The best medicine is comedy or laughter.
Yeah,
I really
yeah.
want to thank you, Carl, for being on the podcast, man. I honestly, coming from a sense of another person's perspective, I want to let you eat your pasta dinner because I
Thank you.
understand what it's like to be there and I could see it. But I really appreciate you doing the podcast, taking the time to be on, and I want to give you here a minute at the end to be able to promote your content where people can find your work and be able to listen into your conversations as well.
Well, that's really kind of you. If anything I've said, I mean, that's the way I like to work. Is if it means something to you and you want to find out more, that's all there is to it. To find me, it's probably best to go to carlmunson.com. CarlMunson.com. Carl@carlmunson.com is my email address. If anything I've said has appealed to you, again, let's have a conversation about it. That's how I am in my business world, in my life. It's about talking and seeing where things go.
Well, thank you so much, Carl, for being on this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.